Hello and welcome to HelloMD Live. I'm Pamela Hadfield.
And I'm Dr. Perry Solomon with this week's news roundup. Pamela, what do we have in Alabama?
Well, Katie Darovitz, she was a pregnant mom and she had severe epilepsy, and the doctors told her that if she were to take her medication that her child would perhaps have birth defects or she would have preterm labor.
So she moved to?
Well, she didn't move anywhere because, as we know, Alabama was illegal for medicinal patients, until very recently. So she decided that she was going to take cannabis in order to stop her seizures.
Oh.
Well, when she went into the hospital and to give birth, the hospital, unbeknownst to her, tested her blood and found that she had cannabinoids in her system, handed that over to Child Protective Services, and when she went home with her baby, she was actually taken away in handcuffs and arrested.
What's this law based on? I mean, just out of the blue, or
what's so Alabama
on?
has this somewhat nebulous gray area law where it was based around meth addicts and people who were using meth around children, that they could be put in prison. But because the way the law was written, it was a little gray, so they were using this for people who were pregnant and using cannabis it was a way for them to put them in prison. So she is not the first that this has happened to.
Because from what I understand, the law applied for any drug, even if it was a prescribed drug, opioids or whatever, for someone's pain. If it was around children, they could take the child away because it was, quote, endangering the child.
Right, and so she has been in this battle for over 16 months. She's lost everything. She did come to a settlement, and as we know, Alabama is one of the most recent states to develop a medicinal marijuana law. So she was able to settle, but the problem is that she has gone through an enormous amount of suffering, and part of that settlement prior to Alabama going legal was that she was going to actually have to move to another legal state if she was going to continue to use cannabis.
Well, part of this also is that the hospital, when you go into the hospital to deliver a child, for example, you sign many consents, and they didn't tell her exactly or ask her, listen, we're going to be testing for cannabis or whatever, so let us know, because either we won't do it or not. But she had no idea that this was going to be happening to her.
No idea. So she was completely, imagine that you have a newborn and the police come and drag you away. But beyond that, it's common sense. The fact that this woman has severe epilepsy, she couldn't be seizuring throughout her entire pregnancy. And if she were to take the drugs, which were perfectly legal, she was going to have a child that would have multiple birth defects. So to me, this is just an absolute travesty that this ever happened.
And the state overstepped its bounds in terms of looking at something that was really personal and private at the hospital when they should have let her know that they were going to do this.
Absolutely. So Perry, what's going on up north in Canada?
Well, Canada has many insurance companies, the largest of which is Sun Life. And what they just decided the other week was that they're declassifying patients who smoke cannabis as smokers. And so they're saying they are classified now as the same as being a non-smoker.
Oh, that's interesting. So even if you smoke cannabis, according to the life insurance company, you are a non-smoker. Why would that be?
Correct, because they've looked at study after study showing that people who smoke cannabis do not have the increased risk of lung disease, emphysema, etc. And so they're taking them out of the same category as smokers who do have an increased risk of cancer and emphysema, and putting them into a non-smoker classification.
So basically what it's saying is that if you're a cannabis smoker, it's not the same as being a tobacco smoker, and they're not apples to apples.
They're saying if you smoke cigarettes and smoke tobacco, you are in a higher risk category than if you only smoke cannabis, you're in the same category as someone who doesn't smoke anything at all.
And so therefore your premiums are going to be lower.
Your premiums are going to be lower.
Which we love.
Which is great, but you have to look at the insurance companies. They're also looking at it in terms of money, and they're realizing that there's a pending legalization of cannabis in Canada, and so there'll be a lot more people who smoke cannabis who want life insurance policies, and they'll be able to offer them a lower rate than if they had been classified as smokers with cigarette smokers.
Well, I think that's great, and I hope that the United States takes a leaf out of that book, and more companies actually throughout Canada do that, because people like to have life insurance for obvious reasons.
Yes, and I think that's what's going to happen, is more of them see the economics of doing this. That's just going to spread for all the insurance companies.
That's great. All right, well, heading back to Oregon, Oregon has a change with their laws around edibles. Surprisingly, recreational users were not able to buy edibles in Oregon.
So they could smoke it, vape it, tincture it, but they couldn't eat it.
No, they couldn't eat it, not legally. So medicinal user was able to buy an edible within Oregon, but there was this restriction that an edible could be no more than 15 milligrams, and you could buy no more than one edible per day.
But that's not enough for some medicinal users.
Exactly. So some medicinal users, 5 milligrams might be enough, but for some, they might need 100 milligrams to control pain.
So now what is going to happen with the recreational users?
So the laws are going to be the same for recreational users as well as medicinal users. So when you go into a dispensary in the next year, you'll be able to buy up to 50 milligrams per day of an edible, but the serving size can be no more than 5 milligrams.
So a bag or a container that's a child, hopefully we'll get into the child thing in a moment, but right now each container is going to be able to hold 50 milligrams of THC.
Correct.
Each of the servings in it can only be 5 milligrams.
Right, and so they're going with this go low, go slow methodology, which I think is actually, it's a really good message to be putting out to the public, that always start with no more than 5 milligrams if you're new to edibles. Mm-hmm. So the principle here is if you start with a serving that's 5 milligrams, people will logically start with one serving.
Okay. Well, part of it, getting back to the child safety part, which is part of the new laws, that the bag or the seal has to be safe, is that there's still problems with children getting into their parents' cannabis.
It's true, and this is like any other controlled substance. You have to either lock up your cannabis products or put it in a place where kids can't get access to it, because children and pets are getting access to cannabis edibles.
Well, and we know in 2014 there was 20 cases of children under 6 going to the hospital. In 2015 there was 25,
right.
And just the first 3 months of this year there were 10 children. So parents still aren't doing a good job in keeping these edibles away from their kids.
Right. So lock up your edibles. And if you're a recreational user in Oregon, you're actually going to have access to edibles.
Which is great. But just remember, each of those bags that your child can get access to now has 50 milligrams of THC. So keep it away, locked up, whatever you have to do. Just keep it away from your kids.
Always a good message. So, Perry, it doesn't seem like we can get away from the NFL. They're back in the news again.
The NFL is having its feet held against the fire.
I think so.
Because Eugene Monroe gave $80,000 for a study, one of the hospitals, University of Pennsylvania Medical School, to study cannabis and concussions and brain injuries that are happening with this fellow football players, because he's a big proponent of cannabis helping prevent any kind of encephalopathy or
CTE, right?
Exactly, nerve damage, trauma to the head that can cause brain damage later on in life.
Right.
So just recently, Jeff Miller, who's the Senior VP of Player Health and Safety at the NFL, and Russell Lonzer, who's a neurosurgeon, also on one of the committees, spoke with one of the doctors there who were talking about how cannabis can help these players.
Right. And so, being the cynic that I am about this topic, I think that the NFL, as you said, has their feet to the fire. What's coming to light in the media is that these NFL players are becoming addicted to opioids. It's akin to the epidemic that's going across the entire United States, and the NFL is being exposed right now. And as people are becoming more and more accepting of cannabis and thinking, what's the big deal? The NFL looks like they're a little bit in the dark.
Well, they are in the dark. They're in the back. They're in the Stone Ages in that theory, except for the fact that they only test their players during training season, and they raise the limits of the THC that they can have in their blood from 15 to 35 nanograms per milliliter of blood. So they know what's going on. They just raise the limits to be acceptable. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to keep making these conversations, etc., with different personnel until they finally realize, and it could be years down the road, to change the policies they have now.
Right. And, well, I'm hoping that some of the recent research about there being hardly any physical health consequences for using cannabis will also help sway their opinion. And maybe they'll just start to reel back the way that they penalize their players during the on-season of the NFL. But well, I'm feeling a little bit cynical about really their motivations and why they're actually doing this.
And the more players that speak up, perhaps it'll happen, as long as, of course, their livelihood isn't put in danger, which at this point in time it is. So we'll just have to wait and see how the story develops.
Yeah, well, it is a wait-and-see one.
Yep.
So, Perry, when was the last time you watched The View? Was it yesterday?
I have to say I have never seen The View. But be that as it may, I know this woman has been on it.
Whoopi Goldberg. So Whoopi Goldberg apparently blindsided ABC. So she's been on The View for about 10 years now. She blindsided them because she came out, about 2 months ago with her announcement that she was starting her own cannabis company. It's called Whoopi and Maya, and they create a variety of products for basically women's issues, whether it be PMS, menstrual pain, migraines, any of that sort of thing. So she came out and ABC said, what?
Wait a second. It's been known for years, and Whoopi is not shy about the fact that she's a huge proponent of cannabis, smokes cannabis, thinks it's great, and ABC never knew this? I mean, what's up with that?
Well, I think the line was here and she jumped over the line. And so essentially the hearsay is
There's money.
that, well, the common knowledge is that within ABC's contract, you're not allowed to go out in public and discuss your personal views on cannabis, which Whoopi has done in the past, but now she made a huge media splash, and her contract is up in August.
Okay.
And so I think this was fairly calculated on her part, whether or not she cares if the contract goes forward. And I think on ABC's part, they're basically saying, you know what, you violated.
So either Whoopi wants to not renew her contract, ask for more money, or ABC is saying, hey, goodbye. Now we have an excuse not to renew you.
I have a feeling it must be a mutual sort of agreement, and that they're coming forward with their statement, and she's clearly made her statement.
Well, we'll see how the view either improves or doesn't improve with
Well,
Whoopi
you know
not
what?
there.
You're gonna have to tell us, because I know you're an avid viewer
We'll
of
have
the
to
View.
get that from other people. I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. So Perry, I always loved going to a church social, because at the church social you get coffee, you get donut holes, and you get cookies.
Well, in Elliotsville, Indiana, they came and got a little bit more than they were expecting.
A little bit more than the cookie.
Well, what happened was someone took pot luck a little too seriously. And literally, really. And what happened is someone brought cookies laced with cannabis to the church function.
And I'm sure this must have been accidental.
Well, we think, yes, it was accidental. Maybe they grabbed the wrong batch of cookies. It was for themselves. But what happened was 6 people who were there, ranging in age from 6 to the early 70s, ate these cookies, came down with various symptoms, and had to be hospitalized.
And that is no laughing matter. 6 to 70, that's just, I can't even imagine. And they had no idea what was going on. So imagine the anxiety, the feeling of paranoia, or in that child's case,
the child got lethargic, the people got hypertension. So who knows what, it's something that went to the hospital. They had no idea what was going on. They just felt odd with their blood pressure elevated. This could have been in the gentleman who had high blood pressure, heart disease in the beginning. And so they got this cannabis that they really weren't expecting.
Right. And so they are probably going to find out where these cookies came from and who they came from. So
that
person got out of Dodge.
They're in a different church, different state by now for sure, because it's something that obviously should not have happened.
Yeah. Well, this is not going to be the first and probably the last case of this happening, but...
Well, it shouldn't have happened. Protect your cannabis. Maybe they just mixed up the batches of cookies. Who knows? But again, this is another call for any kind of edible. Keep away from your children. Don't bring them to church, please, or any social function.
Do not. This is not a potluck. This is not a potluck item.
It is not.
Okay, and until next week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.